Okay, it's right at 1 o'clock, so I hate to hold people up, so I'm going to go ahead and get going, but no worries if you all want to keep the conversation going in the chat and share a little bit about your favorite holiday movie. Doesn't have to be Christmas. I also wanted to note that I dropped the file, the Excel spreadsheet file, into the chat, the link, and then I think I attached the file to it as well, in case you want to do hands-on learning with me. I'll be screen sharing and walking through in a little bit. So feel free to go ahead and download that if you are interested in playing along with me. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. There is some good holiday movies listed in the chat. Sarah, I see your comment and I am going to see if I can share it again. Andy's on here to help me as well. So hopefully if there's any later people who are hopping on, Andy, if you don't mind resharing, because I guess it won't populate in the chat box if people join after the fact. Thank you so much. So good Christmas movie recommendations in here, holiday movies. So hopefully all of you are looking forward to a weird holiday season in 2020 that will hopefully involve at least some of the things that we've enjoyed previously. So without further ado, hi. Thank you so much for coming to this session. I am a total nerd when it comes to data stuff. And so anytime, Andy or somebody I work with is like, you should talk about this. I'm like, does anyone really want to voluntarily come hear me be a dork about numbers? So I am over the moon that there's actually people who want to do this session with me. And I am hopeful that you'll walk away having learned at least one or two new tricks for playing around with data and numbers that you might have living in Excel. So for those of you who I have not yet had the opportunity to meet, my name is Kim Kiesewetter. I joined WiLS earlier in 2020, right before the pandemic actually, as their new data analyst. And it has been awesome. I have had the honor and pleasure of working on all kinds of stuff over the last 9 months, ranging from helping support strategic planning consulting with data work to working on research and data from Wisconsin's digital library on how the pandemic has affected those collections and literally everything in between. And it's just, I feel lucky. I enjoy it a lot. So I am excited to share this next hour with you all. So with that intro out of the way, to dig into today's topic, if you're anything like me, which I totally accept that I might be very weird and you might not be, you might have 1 or 214,000 Excel files sitting around with numbers and data from a variety of endeavors on your computer. We know we need data, and Excel is pretty much a staple for many of us when it comes to tracking numbers, but is there a way to take what often feels like a sea of numbers and make it a little more user-friendly? Spoiler alert, yes, and we're gonna do it in less than an hour, fingers crossed. And I'm gonna share some basic tips and tricks with you all for using Excel to wrangle your data into some friendlier formats that we can play around in. So, I'm going to preface this with a very important statement. I am by no means an Excel guru or expert, but I do have a decent comfort level with the software. So I'm really happy to share some foundational tips and tricks with you all, fully aware that many of you may also have some of your own tips and tricks to share as well. So please, this can be interactive. I know many of you are probably coming in and out. This is your lunch break, but if you have an epiphany as I'm going along about something you want to share, drop it in the box, the chat box, or feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. This can be as informal as you want it to be when it comes to sharing. So we'll go ahead and dig in. So for a quick session roadmap to situate our time together, we're first going to do a quick review of what an existing data source is and why you might want to gather them for your work. And the second thing we're going to do is highlight existing sources of data that might be useful specifically to those working in the library world. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume if you registered for this through WiLS that you're somehow connected to a library. So hopefully these will be helpful and useful to you. And the last part of the session is going to be some hands-on training time. Either you can just watch me walk through stuff. There will be a recording at the end, so you'll be able to look at this in the future, or you are totally welcome to download that data file that's in the chat box. If you're joining late, I'll have Andy right before the hands-on part, see if she can link to it one more time. And you can play along with me as we go. So I'm going to situate our conversation first with just a little background foundational knowledge about why we might want to use or seek out what are known as existing data sources. So many organizations both collect and disseminate data, yours included, and this creates what's known as existing data sources. This is just a term for information that already exists and doesn't need to be collected through like any kind of new or novel research effort like a survey. Existing data sources are really, really valuable to organizations, but often end up just kind of languishing on a computer somewhere. So we can all probably think of data collection efforts we've either conducted or been involved in and asked to contribute data for, and nobody really knows where they ended up, or somebody has a spreadsheet somewhere. So they're not as useful if they end up just sitting somewhere gathering proverbial electronic dust. So sometimes you might have questions about your library. You might be working on a strategic planning effort or thinking about implementing a new program. So knowing what existing data is out there is valuable in and of itself. So just kind of taking stock of what information your institution has can really save time, energy, effort, money in the long run. Additionally, when we're looking at data sources that might not exist at your organization, there's a number of existing data sources that publish data that might be pertinent to your organization. So just for example, when thinking about the library world, census data is freely and openly available through the census.gov website. IMLS publishes their annual data that they gather from public libraries. DPI gathers annual report data from public libraries, and these are all published and available. A lot of us may not poke around with those because it feels overwhelming, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. We're going to take a big spreadsheet and play around in it and hopefully make it feel more manageable. But yeah, when you open up a spreadsheet and it has thousands and thousands of rows of information in it, it can totally feel like, what should I do with this? Where do I begin? That being said, we're going to dive in today with a couple of these big library-specific data sources. However, it's super important to note that what we're going over here can be used with any data that's in an Excel or CSV file. So you can take this and use it for any of your purposes that involve using the specific platform of Excel. I also encourage each of you to check in with your organization and your community partners about any additional data those organizations might gather or have access to in order to really create a holistic picture of your community, data sharing in action, if you will. So you can layer things like demographic data with program data that you might gather internally, or DPI annual report data to really kind of piece together a picture of what's going on in your community or at your organization, as well as partner organizations as well. So the next consideration that we want to make once we take stock of what data we already have access to is the format that it's in. So I know many of us don't necessarily consider ourselves math or data people. as a total plot twist, I was convinced all the way through undergrad that I hated math and I was bad at it. And somehow here I am in this career. Grad school helped change my world. And I love it. So a spreadsheet full of lots and lots of numbers can feel overwhelming to open. So the first thing is for those who are not as confident dealing with large spreadsheets of data is to not panic at all. There's definitely quick, easy ways to sort and filter and hone in on pieces of that that are going to be the most meaningful to you. So today I'll walk you through how to filter and sort your data, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with already. And then I will also help you all build really basic pivot tables to help create a data visualization element. I know for lots of us, just looking at blocks of numbers, it doesn't mean the same as when we're able to see it depicted in a chart or graph. And so I want to make sure all of you leave able to take a spreadsheet that doesn't have any data viz elements to it. In other words, there's no charts, graphs in it already, and build those out so that you can get a quick look at what's going on and use it for either a snapshot of your own data, or in the case of something like IMLS or DPI data, or even census data, being able to create benchmarks or comparisons between different groups, if that's something that might also be helpful to you. I am going to assume, before we jump into things together for the hands-on part, that there's no prior knowledge in Excel, and this is not meant as any kind of offense to anyone, but instead to make sure that everyone can play along with me if they want to. So I wanted to do a quick temperature check with the group about your confidence using Excel. So I am going to launch this poll if it will let me do it while I'm screen sharing. So you should be able to see a question about what your confidence level in Excel is. On an extremely scientific scale, where 1 is like, I try never to open Excel if I can avoid it, to 7 is like, I do this for fun as my quarantine hobby. And 4 is average. Feel free to just kind of drop in where you would put yourself at, just for kind of a general temperature check. As a full disclosure, I would not give myself a 7 at all. I would say I have pretty average skills when it comes to Excel. So do not feel stressed that you need to be skewing high in order to follow along. So it looks like we have a nice mix here ranging from 2 to 6. Nobody wants to rate themselves a 1 or 7. But it looks like we have good mid-range knowledge. So for those of you who rated yourself anywhere on the scale, like I said, when we go along, if there's like a little tip or hint that you have found really helpful in using Excel and making it friendly, feel free to share. This should be an opportunity for us to put our brains together and learn. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll here, and I will share the results out just so everyone can look at it for a moment. So it looks like the one that most people responded to was 5, but like I said, we have a good mid-range base of knowledge here. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to share with you are just a few inspiration spots, if you will, for some data that might be helpful to you. And for many of you, I'm sure these are familiar sources, but I just wanted to kind of show you where you can download these data sets so that you'll be able to play along or use them in the future with the skills that you'll gain today. So when looking at the IMLS Public Library Survey, this data lives on the IMLS site. They have a data catalog with a number of different data endeavors that they have embarked upon. The Public Library Survey is the one I'm going to point to right now. And so from that link, and I'll share these links out with everyone later, just so people can have them. Each fiscal year, there is a set of data. So for the data files for 2018, CSV files are compatible with Excel. So if you're ever looking to download data and you don't see an Excel extension, CSV files will open and function in Excel as well, just on the most basic level. I'm sure it's much more technical than that, but to get you going there. So IMLS data has a lot of overlap with DPI's annual report data and includes information on public libraries. So sorry to academic and special libraries here, on square footage, annual hours, etc. IMLS's PLS survey data has been collected since 1988. They have, over 10 years of data published on their website. So it can be a good way to look at comparisons over time. For example, if you wanted to look on broader than a state scale for a national scale purpose. The next site that I wanted to point you all to is the one that we're going to be playing with the data for the tutorial, and that is Wisconsin's Public Library Service data. So the link to this I dropped in the chat earlier. If you joined later, Andy, if you don't mind putting the link in again, I am going to be playing with this 2018 statistics at the public library level. So you can also download to look at things at the county level, the system level, etc. But the public library level data is so granular, you can look at all of those different buckets of I'm totally having a brain fart on the word that I'm looking for, at all those different groups and still be able to go down to the public library level. So we'll be looking at the 2018 stats there. Another place that you might want to look for larger scale data to play around with if you wanted to look for demographic data is getfacts.wisc.edu. And this one has a data viewer where you can hone in on your city and get different demographic information on your specific community. So you can look at population estimates over time, gender breakdown, different household demographics, racial and ethnic breakdowns, age breakdowns, etc. And you can download all of these charts in the data from the website. Very, very easily. So you would just download it as a CSV file and you could do exactly what we're about to do in a moment with this demographic information as well. So let me get back over to my slideshow. Okay, so with that in mind, we are going to jump in and play around a little bit together. So as mentioned, we're going to use the DPI Public Library Service data. And I'm going to give everybody who wants to, and I'm actually going to check the comment box to make sure things are going okay. If you want to do this with me, you'll want to have the file open. And if you don't mind, just letting me know in the chat if anyone is planning on playing along, because I want to slow down if there's a number of you who are, because I know that if you're doing this on a single screen, you're going to be relying on my audio cues. So I want to make sure I'm going slow enough that people can hear me and follow along. A couple things while I'm waiting on that. If you get particularly lost, if you're playing along, just drop a comment in the chat, Andy will let me know, or you seriously can unmute yourself because I won't be able to see if you pop up an emoji since I'm screen sharing here. And it looks like there are a number of you playing along. So yeah, okay. So for those of you who are playing along with me, I'm going to try and go slowly. So if I start going too fast, someone just, yell at me and Andy will let me know that I should do more pauses. So if you're on a single screen, you can hear me. Also, there's no bad questions. So if you can't find something, if I say something and it doesn't make sense, I regularly say and do something different, let me know. I don't want anyone to leave confused about what's happening. And also, If you have a Mac, I am on a PC, so your version of Excel might look a little bit different. All of the functionality that I'm going to be walking you through is super basic and it should be very similar. But if you get stuck, just let me know and I'll be happy to try and help you find whatever it is if our versions are too different. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing my slides and I'm going to pull open the DPI data spreadsheet. You do not have to use the same spreadsheet as me. It will just be easier for cross-checking purposes, but you can do this with any Excel spreadsheet if you want to. If you just downloaded it, this is one of those fun things that happens. Make sure you've clicked enable editing. I've definitely had moments where I'm like, why isn't this working? Once you've done that, you'll be able to make changes to this data set. So one of the first and most basic things that I do when I am playing with data in Excel, and this is because I make mistakes and I am phobic about losing my original data or having to go back and cross-check stuff. So I always save what's known as my raw data. So this exact data in this form in a password protected sheet. So I can always go back and reference it. And I make a copy of it that I do all my filtering, sorting, and playing in. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do with you all. So to do that, you're going to click this little triangle caret in the top left-hand corner, and that will highlight your whole spreadsheet. You can Control-C or right-click copy. I like to Control-C. And then you're going to go down to the bottom of your spreadsheet, and there should be some type of plus to add a new sheet. Click on that, and a blank sheet will appear. Once again, go up to the little triangle caret in the top left-hand side, highlight your whole sheet, and I'm going to hit Control-V or paste, right-click paste, and I have an identical copy of my data. I am going to go back to the original tab that I copied the data from, and I'm going to password protect it so that I don't somehow magically start working in both sheets and lose my original data. So to password protect your sheet, you want to right click on the tab you're trying to password protect. You'll have a pop-up box appear and click on protect sheet. A new box is going to appear and you just make up a password to write into the password to protect sheet. So I won't tell you my password. Click OK, and you'll be prompted to enter another password. The same password again, to confirm it. Click OK. You've password protected your sheet. To check it, I'll click on something and try to delete it. The sheet will prompt me that this is a protected sheet, and either I need to enter the password if I'm really trying to make changes to it, or I go, "Ooh, I didn't mean to do that on this sheet. Let me go over to my playground, the data that I am going to now mess around with confidence because I know that I have my original data easily accessible to me." So I'm just going to rename this my cleaned data. You can name it whatever you want. I'm getting a message that there's a comment, so I'm just going to make sure that I'm not going too fast. Yep. Dominic says to copy the sheet, you can also right click on the name of the sheet tab below and click move or copy and select create a copy. Absolutely. And once again, you can do that and password protect one of them so that it's your original data and you have your new data as well. So I'm going to start playing around in my free for all here. The first thing I almost always do when I have a large data set like this, so if you scroll through, there's hundreds of libraries, there's tons of different data points, even finding your own library, you might be like, how do I get to that very easily? So I always add filters at the top of my spreadsheet. So I am going to highlight this row here that has the variable names, the lib ID, lib name, city, etc. And at the top bar here, when you're on the home tab, so if you've clicked on another tab, it may look different and you may need to go back to the home tab. I'm going to go over to where it says sort and filter. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to scroll down to where it says filter. I'm going to click filter and it's going to add filters to all of the columns in my spreadsheet. So with the filter there, I can click at the top of each of these, this little drop down box will appear and I'm able to hone in on, for example, if I wanted to just look at my public library system, I could just select Kenosha, hit OK, and see that particular library system's data. If I wanted to look at Kenosha and Bridges, I could click the two of them and it would show me just those ones, those libraries and those two systems there. Similarly, you could sort based on specific libraries that you wanted to look at, etc. A next really easy basic function that can be helpful is sorting your data. So maybe you want to easily be able to see based on resident population from smallest to largest. So I'm going to highlight that column by clicking the F at the top to highlight it. I'm going to go back to my sort and filter button. I'm going to click sort smallest to largest. You could do largest to smallest. You'll get a prompt that says, do you want to expand the selection or continue with the current selection? 99% of the time, not a scientific calculation, you're going to want to expand the selection so that you aren't just sorting this column and it no longer matches up with the correct library. So when I expand that selection, it's going to give me the right information. I haven't messed up the order of the spreadsheet, and it will show me the resident population size from smallest to largest. So that can be fun, right? You can hone in on your library, a couple libraries. You could look at just your library system. There's some basic math functions you could do in here. So you could highlight your resident population column, and maybe you want to be able to see the average number. So you would be able to go up to formulas at your top tab and use the Autosum function to calculate an average, for example, if you wanted to be able to do that as well. This still can be a little bit clunky and difficult to work around when you're thinking about, okay, how can I use this data for decision-making purposes? So we're gonna play now with really basic, easy pivot tables and charts. And I'm going to pause really quickly just to check the chat again and make sure that everybody's doing okay. Okay, looks like everybody's hanging on right now. Okay, so to create a pivot chart, so first I'm going to reselect all my data so that it goes with me. So if you sorted or filtered, you know, just if anything's missing, that can be something to check on. And I am going to go to the tab at the top of my Excel window that says Insert. And there's a button that says Pivot Table. So I'm going to click on that. And I actually want to make sure that I'm bringing my whole data thing. So I'm going to highlight it all since I had just one column highlighted. So I want to take my whole table or range and I want it to open in a new worksheet. So I'm going to hit OK. And a new sheet's going to appear that looks like this. And I need to move my Zoom window so I can do this. So the pivot table chart should automatically open and you'll have a blank table that should appear on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side there will be this box that says I'm going to minimize my Zoom stuff so I can see what I'm doing. A pivot table field selection will appear on the right. If you accidentally close out of the pivot table field, I had a panic moment one time and I couldn't find it again. If you're on the pivot tables tools, if you click field list, it'll come back. So if you exit out of it, it's still there and you can get it back by clicking on the field list. So let's build a pivot table. So I'm going to keep running with the public library system example, but you can pick any metric, public library system, locale is another good one. So I'm going to take public library system from the pivot table fields box. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to pull it down to my rows box here in the pivot table fields. And once I do that, it should look similarly on your computer where you have a list of your public library systems. And I am just picking random stuff. Let's do square footage of library. So I'm going to pull the square footage of library down to the values field. So once I do that, I now have my first pivot table in this data, and it shows me these library systems here and the count of square footage of library. So in Excel, when you pull a variable down into the values box, it defaults to count. Count generally is not going to be what you're probably looking for if you're playing with the data. So what count means is that there's 7 libraries in the Arrowhead library system that have a number listed for square footage of library. That's great, but I don't know that it's particularly useful. So I'm going to change these numbers to something that I think will be a little more useful for analyzing and visualizing things. So if you go down to your values box, there's this little caret square next to count of square footage. If you click on that, a drop-down list should appear, and at the bottom of it, click on value field settings. When you do that, a window will appear, and we're going to change the summarize values by from count to sum first, and we're going to change it again in a minute, but just so you can see different options. Once you click on sum, click OK. And so now the numbers have changed. I cannot read numbers very easily unless they have commas. So I'm actually going to go ahead and change that for my own sake. So I'm going to go back to my home tab, highlight that column, and there's a box that has this drop-down list that says general, number, currency, accounting, date, etc. And I'm just going to click on the comma style here. So that just makes it a little bit easier when I'm dealing with big numbers to tell if I'm in the 100,000s or the millions or the billions or whatever. I'm going to go back to pivot table tools. So now I have a sum of the square footage of the library. So what does that mean? Using Arrowhead library system as the example, what Excel is doing with the sum is taking every library in the Arrowhead library system, looking at each of those libraries' square footage and adding them together. So all of the libraries in the Arrowhead library system that reported to DPI in 2018, the square footage of their library, it has all been calculated and added here. Interesting, but still probably not particularly necessarily useful for what you might be trying to do. So the next option is to go back to the values field. We're going to click that little triangle caret. We're going to click on value field settings, and I'm going to change it to average. So this is going to be the average square foot of the library, and I'm going to click OK. So now it has turned this into an average of all of the libraries in the Arrowhead library system square footage. So the average library for that system is 23,711 square feet. And of course, there's all kinds of different numbers that we could be dropping in here, and we'll play with that here in a moment. Before I build a chart, I am looking at my pivot table, and there's this weird lib_sys item, and I don't want it in my chart. I don't want it in my table. What do? I go up to where it says row labels, and there is a drop-down menu there. So if you click on it, I can see that there is this lib_sys in my list. I'm going to uncheck it. I don't want to see it anymore. I also don't want this blank here anymore, so I'm going to uncheck there. I'm gonna hit OK and it's gone. But in case you're wondering where the libsys came from, because regularly when I'm playing around with data and using pivot tables and charts, I'm like, where is this and where is it coming from? If I go back to my data sheet, if you look at this row 3 here, Excel is counting this label lib_sys as its own row. So that's why it's showing up in my pivot table and why there's no associated data with it, because as we know, that isn't an actual library system. Instead, it is a variable name. So I'm going to go back to my pivot table where I have just my public library systems listed in the average square foot of library, and I want to turn this into a chart. I want to be able to see it. So I'm going to go up to make sure I'm on my pivot tables tools tab. And there is a button that says pivot chart. So I'm going to click on that and I'm just going to do a bar chart. I'm going to hit OK. And it is going to create a bar chart for me of the data that's in my pivot table. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So you can see that it's taken all the library systems, they're listed in alphabetical order right now, and it's taken the average square foot of the library and it's turned it into a bar graph. If you've used charts and graphs in PowerPoint, Excel, Word, in Excel, it's very similar since it's the same platform. So you can hit the plus button on the top right-hand corner of the chart, and you can add or change different elements of your chart. So if you're like, I really want to add data labels to it, you can do that very easily right here. You can change the color, you can change, how the grid lines look. There's a lot of functionality there. And then you can right-click and copy and paste this chart into Word documents, PowerPoint slides, etc. Similarly, if you are playing around with this and you're like, okay, this is great, but I don't need to see every single library system. I just want to see, these specific 3 library systems for, whatever purposes you have. You can filter what shows up on your chart here at the bottom left-hand corner by clicking on the public library system button that has a little filter icon on it. So I could just select, a few right there. You click OK, it will automatically recreate your chart with just those 3 systems. You can also filter it to the exact same effect by going over to your pivot table on the left-hand side and where it says row labels, clicking on the filter there, and you can select all or pick, a few different ones that you wanted to look at there and have a new chart, and it will automatically repopulate. So that is the uber basics. I'm going to show you a couple little interesting things that I found for those of you who are like, ooh, this is data specifically that I'd want to look at. But I wanted to pause for a moment and check the chat and see how everybody was doing. If you're with me, if you have questions, thoughts, tips, etc. So I'm going to pause for a second and look, feel free to unmute yourself too if that's easier. I don't see any questions in the chat. I'll give everyone who's on a moment to think. Okay, so if you're still with me and everybody's good, some different metrics or ways you might want to look at data here involve pulling down different variables to your rows or your axis categories for the pivot tables. So I'm going to put public library system back up here. One of the metrics in the DPI data that I found can be really interesting if you're interested in ever doing comparisons is to look at locale. So this, actually, there it is, it's right there. Another tip that I should have mentioned sooner is when you are looking for something in a really large data set for a pivot table, you do not have to scroll through everything. You can type the name of what you're looking to in the field and it will bring it up, which is definitely a lot easier than scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So I'm actually gonna pick the locale description, easier to understand. So similarly to the public library system, locale can be another good one for library comparison purposes because of the way that those are coded. So IMLS codes has like these different definitions for locale codes that are based on population size and designates between cities, rural areas, suburbs, towns, and then if they're big, small, distant, fringe, remote, etc. And so that's all published on the IMLS website. If you want to look into a little bit more which libraries fall into the same locale as yours. So I'm going to once again deselect this see annual population estimates. I don't need that in my chart, and I also don't want the blank. So I'm going to hit OK. And I now have a chart of square footage based on library locale. You can also change your chart to something other than just a column chart. So if we go up to pivot chart tools, I meant to go to pivot table tools, we can add in a different pivot chart and you're able to change it to, in this case, a line graph doesn't make sense, but if you had data from different years over time, you could use a line graph for that. Pie charts can be used anytime you're trying to add something up to 100%. So it wouldn't make sense when we're looking at average square feet, but is another chart option there. If you wanted to have a bar chart instead of a column chart, you could do that. So I'll delete out this one chart so that it's not in my way. And just to show you kind of some of the different options there. So instead of square footage, we could pull something different down in here. So resident population might be something that you would want to look at with a comparison there. When I look at this chart, one of the first things I notice is I'm like, okay, I don't think that these numbers make sense, right? I'm like, what's 20, 40, 60? And that's a reminder to me that Excel is going to auto populate with the way that I have my settings to count. So I'm going to go down to, just as that review the values box, click on the caret, go to value field settings, and I'm going to go to average, but some would be another option that might make sense in this, and look at what the average resident population is. And probably this isn't surprising once you start looking at how those things are coded. And once again, you can add in data labels by clicking on the plus of the chart on the right-hand side and going down to data labels and adding that in. And I see that a chat is coming in, so I'm gonna check and see. Lori says, Kim, I don't have a search bar above my pivot tables field. How do I get that? So let me see. So when you pull up, Lori, your pivot tables fields, I honestly am not 100% sure. So let me close out of that and see if when I click field list, if there's a way to change what's here. I honestly don't know how to do that, Lori. I have never had that happen. So I'm not 100% sure how to add that field in if it doesn't exist. So if anybody does know, yes, please feel free to help enlighten us here. There may be by clicking on the tools a way to change it, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Thank you for asking. But yeah, so that was my spiel for you all. I know it was fast and furious, but I wanted to make sure to leave time for you guys to play around a little bit, and to ask questions, to pull things down, to share any thoughts, questions, etc. So I'm going to shut my mouth for a minute and just give everyone time to let it simmer and sit for a minute, and to drop questions in the chat or to unmute yourself for those of you who are playing along if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns. Now keep checking the chat. Why are they called pivot tables? I honestly have no idea, Matt. That's a really good question. Things I don't think about. Now I feel like I need to look this up on my phone and tell you the purpose of the naming of these specific tables. So Wikipedia tells me that pivot tables, they're just called this. They rearrange and arrange statistics in order to draw attention to useful information. So pivot table is a generic term, but Microsoft trademarked pivot table in 1994. Nancy says there's a tool pack that you can add to Excel. So maybe that is the reason for the extra search bar. So that's good to know. I'm scrolling through. Lisa says, this is super advanced, but can you do pivot tables with data from multiple tabs? Yes, you can. And I will happily walk through that. When it comes to inserting a chart into a doc or a PowerPoint, just copy and paste. And yes, let me take a minute, Susan and Nancy, Susan and somebody else just asked a question. And somebody else asked, I'm going to show you how you can change it and then copy and paste it out. And yes, Erica, if you create a pie chart, there is a way to display the values as percentages rather than the same as it appears on the data table. So let me do some chart playing around here. So first, if you have a bar chart, column chart, something like that, any chart in here, and you want to change things about how they look, you're going to click on this plus here, and I'm going to go over to data labels, and I'm going to click on more options, and that brings up this field over on the right hand side that'll let you change colors, labels, etc., change how your data is displayed. So if you wanted to change it from a percentage to a number or back and forth, those are all things you can do. And once your stuff is highlighted, it's just like in Word, you go up to the home tab, you can change it to, you know, Times New Roman, and I want it to be a 14 size font. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to say, let's make it 14. This is hideous. I would never actually use this, but just so you can see that you can make it bigger and smaller. So those are things you can all do here in Excel. And then literally you can just make sure you're clicked on to your chart and Control-C. And then I think I have a Word document open. So just pretend you don't see my stuff that I have written on here. I'm going to open up the new page, and then you can just Control-V, and there's your chart right here in a Word document. You can do the same thing in PowerPoint, and since they're all Microsoft platforms, you can still edit how it looks the exact same way in Word as you would in Excel. So you can change it so that, you know, the colors are different, the fonts are different by clicking on you know, the labels that you're trying to change and going up to the home tab and switching through to whatever font, size, colors that you want to use, so that they can be on brand with your library or your library system. Let me go back to the chat box. Nancy highlights that LinkedIn Learning, formerly lynda.com, has a lot of Excel video tutorials. I know that our executive director, Jennifer, did another tutorial, I believe it was in Gale. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there that are way beyond the clunky basics that I'm walking you all through today to get you started. Oh, yep, Anne confirmed Gale. So those are another option too. Let me make sure I'm not missing any questions. I'm bad at multitasking. Okay, let me see if I can think of a good pie chart to do so I can show how to change some of that stuff. So I'm going to delete this out. I'm going to switch my, oop, I did not mean to do that at all. Yeah, so I'm going to make a pie chart that isn't a good pie chart. So just note that this is not data that should be displayed in a pie chart, but assuming that it was, if you wanted to add percentages and things of that nature, there's different ways that you can make that happen. One is to highlight your numbers here and to turn them into percentage. Also, these are not percentages, so this is going to be a hot mess express, but just to show you how you can do it. And then you would add your data labels into the center, and it would show you your percentages. Because this is not meant to be displayed as a pie chart, it is super messy, but just imagine that there was just a few slices there, and it will be on the data labels part that you'll be able to add in those percentages there. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, etc.? I'm still here and I'm going to be here to do that, but that was my little spiel. Erica, yes. Let me see if I can do this so that you can see. Erica asked, can you sort the results in a pivot chart to have the largest to smallest display? Yes, you can, and I'll do that momentarily. Nancy, I see your comment that says, I have used recommended pivot table instead of building my own table. Yes, Excel's recommendations are normally pretty spot on for whether a bar chart or a column chart versus a pie chart would be more appropriate. So just from like a data viz backing up standpoint, when you're doing comparisons of average numbers, for example, those are not going to add up to 100%. So you wouldn't want to use a pie chart for that, a column chart, or a bar chart, or some kind of other fun data viz that's not insinuating that everything adds up to 100% is good. So let me pull up a column chart and see if I can show you how to sort from biggest to smallest. So I'm going to turn these back into general numbers with commas, and I'm going to go and I'm going to insert a pivot chart. And to the point about recommended pivot tables, when you click on it, it'll show you different tables that you might want to look at and play with to get you started. If you're like, I have no idea what variables I'd want to pull in. So for the pivot chart, I'm going to add a column chart in here, and I'm gonna so one way that you can do this is to sort it smallest to largest just by highlighting the column and clicking the sort and filter button. So in case I did that too fast, because I realized I was just clicking through things and not describing it. If you wanted to organize things so that they were in some kind of chronological order, smallest to largest, largest to smallest, one way you can do it is by just highlighting that column in your pivot table and going over to your home tab and clicking on sort and filter and filtering either smallest to largest or largest to smallest. And Excel will automatically do that for you. You don't have to do anything else. It'll just reorder it there. You can also sort and filter what order things are by clicking on that plus button in your column chart. Here, let me get rid of this accounting number because it's going to make me crazy. By clicking on the plus here, and it'll let you rearrange your axes there as well. Let me see what other questions are coming. And Nancy says, could you show the average population on the chart and then show the percentage of each slice? I think so. I think I'm understanding what you're asking, Nancy. Well, I don't know in that specific, like if for thinking about, population size, can you reword that a little bit, and I might be able to see if I can pull that together for you. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anybody's questions that are coming in. Nice. Erica says, I got a pie chart to sort percent of registered borrowers by local description. Perfect. Let me see if I download it, if I can open it so everybody can see. Yay. Yeah. Can you all see what Erica shared? She did sum of total registered borrowers by locale, and then she was able to calculate what percentage they all made up of those total registered borrowers. Yay, that looks awesome. And you did that really fast, Erica. You guys are giving me ideas for ways that I would want to look at data. What else? Do you all have any other questions, thoughts, inspirations? Lisa says, under the value field settings, you can change it to percentages. Yes, by clicking on show values as. So I'll bring that up really quickly so that you can see that, because that is helpful as well. So I'm going to add my field list back. So if you click on the values, in the value settings field. So I have been showing you all the summarized values by, but you can show the values as percentages as well by clicking the drop down box, and there's a bunch of different options for that as well. Then Nancy says, looking at Erica's, could I show the number of borrowers and what that percentage is? 21% of what? So for your, you can show, yes, in Erica's chart, 21% is 21% of all the locale types. So when you're looking at all the different, when you're looking at the total number of borrowers, I don't have her chart pulled up still to reference it, to give the exact numbers. But yes, so that percentage would be of all, yes, and Erica's saying no, 21% of all borrowers are in large cities. So that pie chart is a breakdown of all borrowers and what percentage of those borrowers are coming from those different locales. So of all borrowers in Wisconsin, 21% of them are coming from whichever part of the slice was 21%, because I don't have it open.
This is Nancy. I figured it'd be easier just to ask you.
Thank you.
Is there a way for me to show the 21% and that it was equal to that the 1,500 or whatever is equal to the 21%. So I can show both the number and the percentage.
So you want to be able to show the actual number and the percentage on
Correct.
the same chart? I think so. Let me see if I can, I mean, I'm sure there is a way. I'm trying to think if there's like a fast way to do it. So if I am dropping a chart in here, a pie chart, which is not the right kind of pie chart here because this is the wrong numbers here. You should be able to add your data labels, which are the total number here. And let me go over to more options. So when you click on more options, it'll show you different values you can add in. So right now it's showing me the average of resident population as a number because I don't have it set to a percentage. I could add in additional items to it. So you could definitely, depending on where your numbers were pulling from, have both of those in there. And if you remind me, Nancy, will specifically look at your example and see if I can help you create something there, if that's what you need. Okay, awesome. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I know we're right at 3, so I don't want to run over, but if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to ask them now. Just like Nancy, you can unmute yourself, or feel free to email me. I'm Kim, K-I-M, at WiLS.org. Thank you all so much for playing along with me. Like, this is way more interactive than when I've done these trainings. So I'm sorry you had to listen to me awkwardly read through the chat box, but it was really fun to get to do this with y'all. And I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season coming up. Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.